It's a great pleasure for me today to announce two scientists I got to know 6 years ago when they were giving an ambitious workshop seminar here in Germany at Leuphana University in Lüneburg. For one weekend, Dippel and Sonia Fizek gathered teams of very creative students at the gamification lab at Leuphana University and offered them the chance to reflect their academic lives, their careers, and their research and disciplines also by developing meaningful and fun games, so-called serious games. Sonia and Anne had also invited various experts. It was psychologists, game developers, cultural scientists, so there was a various range of academic disciplines giving input. And together they managed to design an incredibly creative atmosphere and managed to kickstart debate, project development within one weekend. It was amazing. So, and of course, the nights were also short and unforgettable because we were allowed to test out all these technologies and cool games we had at the gamification lab. So it was really amazing. And 100% deservedly, also this seminar received the, I have to read it out, Teaching Award for Science-Based Teaching of the University of Jena at the same year, and got that honor. What I realized that weekend was, besides being brilliant scientists, good writers who don't dare to cross disciplines and go innovative ways, and being both sharp thinkers and amazing writers, actually really amazing writers, it's always a pleasure to read your texts. That is what you're really good at. Connecting people from various ends of various disciplines and makes them understand each other, helps them to get their ideas out and connected and yeah, cross disciplines. So, and here they are, Dr. Anne Dippel from Friedrich Schiller University of Jena, Germany, and Dr. Sonia Fizek from University, United Kingdom. A very warm welcome to you, Anne and Sonia.
Thank you, Pelle, for your kind introduction that made me blush. I'm very happy to have such an international audience here in front of us. And we need our slides. Yeah. Before I start, I want to say, are there any physicists in the house? Physicists? One physicist? Is there any sociologist, anthropologist in the? Oh, that's great. I'm very happy to see you.
How many
Hi.
sciences? How many arts and humanities?
No, that's not our talk. But it's nice.
Okay, wait. Well,
we can have like
can
this kind of
right?
jam. There's this science slam where you just have to present slides of talks that you have never seen before. It's very funny. I could try to do that, but
that would be a playful idea in itself. Do you hear us well? Yeah? Okay.
I'm so sorry, my mistake.
No worries. Just in case, we have it on the pen drive as well. So.
Yeah, but I could start already before. So we have quite a few people from Europe, I assume, but we have people from all over the world. And here in Europe, especially, we are celebrating this year a 30-year anniversary. And does anybody have an idea what we celebrate this year? What is the big, big celebration, especially in Eastern Europe?
The Berlin Wall fell?
Yeah, exactly. The Berlin Wall fell. Or in other words, but it's not only the Berlin Wall that fell, but we had actually many revolutions at the same time. We had a revolution in Romania. Some people might know this. It was a very, very, very moving and also exciting thing. We can be very happy that there was no war coming out of that. We had a revolution in ex-Yugoslavia, of course, as well, and we know what happened afterwards there. We had a revolution in Eastern Germany, and the Germans are very proud to say that's the only revolution in Germany that actually was successful and it was peaceful, but something very rare for us. So we are really, really moved by this. And why we are bringing this up actually is because for two reasons. And one reason is that Sonia and I would never be able to work together without this anniversary. Because Sonia is from Poland and I'm from Germany. I'm the West girl, she's the East girl, and we both are totally different race in a way.
There it is, that's our talk. So we don't have to improvise in front of you. Right, so
yeah, I said already you're from the West
you were
and
telling
the
things,
East.
I was trying to figure out with Pelle the presentation. So where are we? We're at we're standing at the wall.
People know already that you're from the black and white side.
Okay. Yeah, yes. Right. So why are we actually starting with this little historical, very important historical moment? Is to kind of start with a metaphor of a wall that, as you see here on the second picture, wall that has to be surmounted, or the wall that has to be broken down. Today we don't want to talk about walls, we would like to talk about bridges. And one of the possible ways to build bridges, interdisciplinary bridges, and you're all here representing at least 6 different disciplines, if not more, working on 6 different topics that have a lot to do with one another. So how to best build bridges and what can help you to get together. And well, Pelle introduced us, we have a lot to do with games and play. And we will try to argue today for the collaborative magic of play, and also for play as a method of research and games as tools for change. But let us come back to this wall again for a little bit.
Yeah.
And we have also other greater concerns these days, also political concerns, right?
Yeah, exactly, because this wall fell because of people were protesting. And protest, as you all know, is a very viable and useful tool to change things. We know this all over the world, protests change things, but protests can also be torn down and suppressed by governments who are actually not that much for protests because this is somehow challenging their society. So we are thinking also a lot about how can you and what tools can you use that in a way are undermining those very repressive organs that can be considered useful, and we think it works with play and games. And why do we say that? And that's again bringing us back to our both different socializations. This here on the right, now I took a colorful image. I tried to find a beautiful image from a Polish classroom. On the left, it's a Polish classroom, a post-socialist classroom of Sonia. That's not Sonia, she was much thinner and much more sporty. But as you can see, they all sit like you sit right now. So we call this in German Frontalunterricht. It sounds already very boring. And that's to the right, that's where I went to school. Does anybody recognize what kind of school system this is? You know it? No, nearly. It would be, but I cannot sing my name, unfortunately. No, that's a Montessori school.
How many have heard of Montessori educational system?
Oh
Brilliant.
my God, all brains. Yeah, that's the thing. So as you see, people or little children, they're sitting there in a quite messy room, and everybody is playing something where they learn things. And the right side is the playful side. But in the left side, or your left side, is the side which is the gameful side, because games are discipline-bound, or are rule-bound, actually.
Right, so we actually thought, again, you will see how this, well, maybe a little unimportant, very early biographical background, what it actually has to do with us as scholars today and with the disciplines that we are, or with the interdisciplines or fields that we're representing. So yeah, Montessori educational system, as you probably all know, is very playful. Whereas my post-socialist educational system was very competitive, very much restricted and focused on rules, which are of course also part of what games are. Games are not only free play, they can be. I can just spin on my foot in front of you and that's a form of play, or playing with words, what we are doing right now. But games can also be very rule-bound, systems that are very good in explaining complexities, because you have to boil them down to rules. And I stand here today a little bit on the rules side, while Anna stands on the play and collaboration and community side. Right. So how did that influence our academic path? I was trained as a philologist. I studied English philology, that is English literature, linguistics, historical linguistics, cultural studies, all those sorts of things. But philologies, I don't know how it is today, but philologies tend to be very disciplinary, very focused, very confined in their boundaries. The questions that I was asking myself as a student of your age probably, and then later on as a master's student, I very early on noticed that those questions cannot be answered in my discipline alone. So I had to, they were just going beyond the boundaries of that discipline. The questions that interested me were literature and computers, literature and technology. And this, at my department back then, seemed almost, well, it didn't go together. What you see here is hypertext fiction, early 80s. So computer literature, which was not only written on a computer, but also native to the medium itself. So based on hyperlinks, something that we all very well know today when we Google things or when we read things on Wikipedia. But philology failed me in many ways back then. So I was looking for another home. And that home for me was game studies. And game studies is a very young discipline, or a very young interdisciplinary field, which has been existing now for maybe just 20 years, and is gathering people like yourselves, people from very many disciplines and very many backgrounds, which means that the field that I landed in is par excellence in this interdisciplinary, which I find great. Right, so that's my home, that's where I sit in today.
And it's a rising field because there's around 1 billion people playing games, video games all over the world.
They
and
all
that's
have
something
questions.
you need to keep in mind. We have a rising population of people who play games on all over the world, and that's a big chance. It's a new medium, and it's a medium that connects us. It's a medium that produces communities, that produces chat rooms. As you maybe know, there are the good ones and the bad ones, but we know that many of the conversations that try to undermine any CIA or German would be BND would actually take place in game chat rooms. So this is a place that produces, on the one hand, subversive spaces, and on the other hand, it brings people together. And that's something one need to keep in mind, that games are not just something toyful for little children, but that is something that actually can have influence on societies. And that games are important for societies is something that is, of course, important for my discipline. I'm an anthropologist. People here in the room are anthropologists too. That's a very classical image of a very famous anthropologist, actually the inventor of the fieldwork, the empirical qualitative fieldwork. Does anybody recognize him here, of the anthropologists here? Yes.
Bronislaw Malinowski.
Exactly, and where exactly is this picture taken?
It should be the Trobriand Islands.
Yeah. Perfect, that's it. And
Heard before we gave that
I really like
Were
this
you
guy.
primed?
I like him, not only because he's Polish, but as you can see, that's a very colonial style of doing ethnography, and my way of doing ethnography is a bit different. I still have a hat on, but I'm working with technology, and I'm working amongst people who are highly educated, who are coming also like you from all over the world, who form a cosmopolitical and cosmopolitan society on the base of physics, actually. And that's what you see behind me is the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, where I'm standing around 1 kilometer under the floor. And that's where I'm actually doing research, and that's where I found the researchers doing. I have to say, sorry, I have a little baby and it just cried, and it is hard for me to do two things at the same time. Mothers know. So
First keynote after the birth.
I'm off in 20 minutes. So that's where I'm doing the research. And that's also how I deal with researchers or people that I'm doing research on. So it's not only me going somewhere, taking some data and then presenting it to other white people and saying, oh, look what I found about these people. Actually, it's people who observe me, who can read my stuff, and that's how current anthropology is done. No matter where you do research, be it in Africa, in South America, in the Antarctic North Polar region, or at CERN under the Earth, all over the world, we do a totally different form of research these days, and that's a research where we are ethically bound, and we know that what we do is something that is happening on the same eyesight. And that's very, very important to us, that we really change the way we are dealing with things, but it's also changing the way we are doing research, because our objects are not anymore objects, they are subjects and they can talk back. And while I did this research, I found out that they actually do not only work, they play. And that led me to our collaboration and to the question how ludology and ethnography actually can meet.
And that's the event that Pelle was actually alluding to at the very beginning. So our paths, well, you know, that's why we started with the wall. If the wall had not fallen down, we probably would have never met, but that's a very grandiose story. There are many other serendipitous reasons why we met and decided to work together on many questions. But our very first collaboration was precisely this event, Ludology meets ethnography. So how to combine games, playfulness, gameful thinking with ethnography as a method, and how to work with anthropology students and make them into a little bit of game designers and change their way of thinking about their own discipline. So this is what brought us together, and you will see a little bit more to come. Right, that's our roadmap for today. So after this very interdisciplinary, historical, biographical introduction, we would like to take you on a little trip. Level 1. Anna will tell you a little bit more about modes of play. So how play creates collaboration or facilitates collaboration, how play can be also competitive, and how all of this creates communities, a question that is, of course, at the core for an anthropologist. Then I will take over, and as a game studies and game design person, I am actually not interested in people that much. I should be, the players, but I am very much interested in the objects and in systems thinking and how things work. So I'll take you on a little trip on play as a method and games as tools for change. I'll not spoil it, I'll leave it at that. And then we have a little end game for the end, something for you to take away. You'll see what our takeaway meal is, and we're very much looking forward.
All right, modes of play, collaboration, competition, and community. That's where I'm doing research. And this is an image I took already from one of the office doors at CERN itself. Does anybody not know what CERN is? Really, no, everybody has heard about the Large Hadron Collider colliding particles. You all went to school and you're all over the world. Do you see what I mean with having a global cosmology that unites all people? Because everybody here in this room has heard about this kind of physics. And although some of you might be raised as Buddhists, others raised as Catholics, third ones as raised as Muslims, and we are not that much acquainted about the details of our religions, you all have learned basics of physics, and that really helps me to actually do my research and to explain to you what I actually do research on right now. And that's the fascinating thing for me, but because I think there is something hidden in science that really unites people and that somehow transgresses religions and national differences and all those things. That's an image of the Large Hadron Collider as you see it. That's the beautiful Lake Geneva. One can swim there in the summer, be on the lake. You can go on the Jura Mountains. You can go up and down. And this region actually has always been a region where people went through. So when they were building the Large Hadron Collider, they found Roman coins, they found Irish coins, they found coins from all over the time. So this is a cosmopolitan place since a long time. And today there are around 10,000 physicists, informatics people, all different disciplines coming together, working here at CERN. And they are therefore not only considered as a large hadron collider, but also as a large human collider. And as soon as there are so many people coming together, there are, of course, anthropologists coming along and sociologists, because they are interested in how people live together and how people make sense of their world. And here at the CERN, they actually are hunting particles and gathering traces. I like this image. It's made by an art historian who's doing the posters for this conference over years and years, and he always takes it, and there's lots of irony in this image. It's a very famous French 19th century painting, and what you actually see there is drudgery. It's drudgerous work. Everybody who has ever worked on the field or sees somebody working on the field knows that these backs hurt at the end of the day. And that's exactly what science actually also is. There is something that is very, very intense work. Every day you have to, in order to gather those traces of those tiniest particles we can actually detect, you have to work a lot. And you could, in a competitive environment as CERN is, where all the best people from all over the world come together, sometimes actually maybe better end up in a psychological institution with all those competitive co-competitors instead of actually doing your work. And so my question is, how do they survive in an environment that has been designed by managerial concepts that are ruling out actually all fun? And what I realized is that they have lots of fun. And that's the way they survive this environment. And if you are a Marxist, you could even say, in a way, these kind of mode of productions that we're currently entering also in a digital world, you see that they are using the last resort of human energy and activating that, and that's the ludic drive that we have, so the playfulness. Because we go on and on and on and repeat when we can play. So this Game of Hadrons, there's the last season of Game of Thrones, now taking place. There's just the second season ended of the Game of Hadrons. They prepare for the third one. They end in 2035, so there's a long span of genealogy, people working on it. This Game of Hadrons works that people are putting proton packets into a collider. The collider is accelerating those hadrons, those protons, and they are colliding at 4 different spots where they are detected. And at these spots, people use Monte Carlo-based methods. It's a computer simulation form. And here is a quote from one of the physicists, what actually those measurements are based on, which kind of calculations they're based. And this is, again, as you see already at the core of the mathematics used to understand those particles, is a dice game. It's chance, and that's one sort of game. At each point of the detector, the dice is thrown to find out if and how a specific particle interacts with the material of the detector. So I leave this to the side of the epistemics, and for the anthropologists, you could say that there's a sort of deep play going on. So I take another example from another anthropologist, deep play. This is an image of the Cockfight in Bali. In Indonesia. It's a very famous example in anthropology where you can see that a play or a game, in this case the cockfight of those Balinesian people, is actually staging society and societal values. And while here in Bali, one of the most peaceful societies of the world, the cocks are fighting, but not the guys with the pung cocks are fighting. So they're fighting instead for them. And that's maybe the reason why it's such a peaceful society. And we have to ask who is actually, what is actually negotiated when particles are circulating and colliding, and what kind of community is imagined there, because it costs €1 billion to gather those traces of those particles. And so it seems that not only for the European Union, but for the whole wide world, these little unseen things are worth a lot.
Can you just slide back to the cockfight? I just wanted to say there's a really great concept in game studies, maybe not as deep play, that in a way explains what is happening there. And I call it delegated play. It's a play that you do not play yourself, but you delegate to somebody else, and it leads to something that's called interpassivity as opposed to interactivity. That's also part of my current research, so I had to kind of give that little input there. So yeah, delegated play.
So when they do this stuff, and there's those particles running around, you see this is an image of a test run, then there's lots of pressure going on. And you think there are just humans and technology in the room, but actually even those reasonable physicists are having fun things in between their serious ambient modes of technology. I found in the Atlas control room this little rubber duck over there. And of course, I thought, I went home and I said to an anthropological friend, like, I went to CERN and all new I found was a little rubber duck. And this friend said, you have to follow the duck. And that's what I'm doing. I'm following since 4, 5, 6 years now, nearly, the duck. And it led me even here. And if there's any person, is anybody doing laboratory work here? Sitting there sometimes, anybody? Have you seen talismans, gimmicks, little toys in your laboratory, by example? You might have seen those things. And it doesn't matter if you go to a biology department or a physics department, wherever you go, you find those little things. And you think, how is this possible that those reasonable scientists have those little things and toys there? For what are they there? And there are also physicists who ask that questions about those rubber ducks, because it's not only at CERN that you find those rubber ducks, but there is a whole genealogy of rubber ducks in the US, in UK. So you see those ducks are traveling. And as an anthropologist, I have to say, they are there for a reason then, because people simply, when they use such things, they are not there just for that. But we will see. So they ask how only an expensive research with a worldwide collaboration will be able to discover that. And that's an image taken from this person, going back to that. That's the expensive collaboration. I am actually a collaboration of DNA and other things. I'm not that as expensive as CERN. But I think I found out with our great methodological reasonability how and why they are there. So I asked people, this is what we do. We look at people, what they do, what they say, what they do, and what they say. And these are 3 different things, as Margaret Mead said. So I asked them, and one guy said, of course, this is just a pun from some guys. But as I said, puns don't really exist for us. There's a reason when there are so many ducks around. And of course, I understand it as a work play. It's a data acquisition duck, the duck on the data acquisition desk. Yes, it's a word play, but then with many researchers, you could say that if you use something symbolically, then it also shows us about a real way of dealing with things. And then we go closer to what the people say. They share the same pronunciation. The yellow toys are just nice to have play with when there is too much work. So you see there's irony already going on, because there is always never time to play with this duck. But on the right side, you see things that show us already more closer why this duck is there. It is there to observe us. And who is there to observe us if we acted good or bad in different religions of the world? It's some entity we have never seen. It's some entity that guards us, that leads us, that brought us into the world. And be it God or all the different names for gods and gods on the one hand, who are, with an anthropology, imagined embodiments of communities, as Emile Durkheim would say. Those little ducks actually are immaterial objects or placeholders for something that creates the values and that represents the values of those people there, which means that it's not only there to bring luck, which is enhancing our energies, but it's also there to explain the coding problem, or in another way, it's there to mirror our values and to make sure that we do the right thing. So those toys are there for a reason. And I could go on and on and on. I found different forms of play in all levels. I found a whole logic infrastructure. And this brings me to the point that you can actually see that there is data as drudgery, where you see those people are gathering those traces, and it's hard work. But in order to do that and to survive it and to live the community that they live, data turns into something that is a toy. I exercised this by myself then. I'm always watching the physicists, and then I try to do it as good as I can in anthropology. I exercised this in the classroom. It works really well. Students love to learn when they can make a game out of what they have just learned. And I also try to, and in the future, try to continue with actually inventing with other scientists together games that change the way we think. Which brings me to the question, Sonia, that you will be able to answer: what is games as tools to think about, and how can we change the world with this?
Okay. I decided to, in my part, to focus on, first of all, on different examples of games, and games that are not only there to be fun, but games that represent some kind of, that are the so-called games for change, or serious games, or games with a purpose. There are very many names for those. And perhaps one of the first such games that was meant to represent a complex issue, probably too complex for the greater public to understand, is the landlord's game. It was designed in 1902 by Elizabeth Lizzie Maggie, one of the first game designers. And she did that in order to illustrate the economic theories of Henry George. So this game became a precursor to something that we all know today, Monopoly, which is also very ironic because Monopoly has lost its well, revolutionary aspect. Monopoly today, and we all have played Monopoly, I'm assuming, or at least have heard of Monopoly, is played for fun and is actually teaching new generations how to play with money, or how to actually find a very capitalist system playful, right? But back then, it was meant to do something else. It was meant to actually make a point on landlords and how landlords and tenants, and how this kind of landlordship is creating inequalities in society. So I thought it is a very fascinating example to start with. 60 years later, something else happens, an even crazier idea if you think about it. An idea to use the power of collaboration and games in order to bring the problems of the whole world together. So not only designing a game like the landlord's game that would actually help to understand a systemic relationship about one specific problem, the landlords and the tenants. In this case, Buckminster Fuller, an inventor and a visionary, was trying to introduce something that he called comprehensive anticipatory design science. So imagine there is a game which is able to bring the people from all over the world, like yourselves, and is able to possess the data about the whole world, the data on resources, the political data, the social data, and then based on that, figure out how to redistribute the resources in a fair way. So the problems or the questions that he was asking back in 1960s are very similar to the questions that we are asking ourselves today with the climate change, with the Anthropocene, or with the problems that polarize, other political problems that polarize societies. Of course, back then, when Buckminster Fuller was having his great idea, the world was not united by digital technology. So you might actually ask yourself, how was it even possible to gather that whole data? And that's where the science, that's when the science point comes in. So he thought, if we combine collaboration, if we combine system and game thinking, and if we combine the scientific knowledge, the data acquisition, if we put it all into one bowl, we might be able to solve the problem of research and of resource and wealth distribution around the world. So the main point that he was trying to make with this world game, it was also at the beginning called World Peace Game, and then was shortened into World Game, was to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or disadvantage of anyone. It is a very utopic vision. And he was actually, the bigger question he was asking is, where are we heading as humanity? Are we heading towards utopia, or how, in a good sense, or are we heading towards oblivion? In 1960s is also a very peculiar historical moment, so no wonder that this kind of idea is born. It is, on the one hand, a time after the Second World War, after the whole vision of society and history as we know it has repolarized itself, but it is also a time when cybernetics is kicking off, and when systems thinking, that kind of thinking that you can just put all the data together and create something logical out of it and boil it down into something that is graspable, is not only observable in something as interdisciplinary as this, but you can also see it in linguistics and many other disciplines. So the systems, how the systems work together. And he was trying to think further, and he even said that the new revolution that we have to follow as a society these days, as back in the 1960s, should be a revolution by design. It kind of rings a bell maybe for those of you who have heard of the new buzzword of today. It's not gamification anymore, it's called design thinking, right? It's very similar to what Buckminster Fuller was thinking back in the day. And he also thought, well, how to do that? I can actually probably write a whole new map for the world, which is not round, which is not obscuring and dividing, but which is bringing everything together on one plane. He called it a Dymaxion map. And it was drawn like this. A map which he thought would make it a bit easier to bring all those elements together. So a map that would highlight patterns and relationship, a map that would present humanity not as disassociate, remote, and so on and so forth. Another example I want to show you very quickly is this. This is already 2010. It's a game that was designed specifically for biology, and it's a game in which people from all over the world, it's an MMORPG, multiplayer online role-playing game, have the chance to help the scientists to fold molecules and create data patterns that then maybe later on could be picked up by the algorithms that could learn from the people and from their behavioral patterns. In 2016, Eterna reached around 250,000, 100,000 players. And this one over here is a very different thing. It's something that represents the movement of radical games. And radical games are making nothing else but trying to make a political, very often political point or a critical point by, in a gameful way. And this one here is called Lykinia. It's a city building game for the Anthropocene. And it's designed by a collective called La Mule Industria, very well known for such types of games that criticize oil industry, that criticize companies like McDonald's and globalization, that also make critical political points on pedophilia and many others. So how do you actually how can you even comment on something like that by making a game? Well, games, as I said, are representing, especially the strategic games, the so-called systems thinking, right? So in this case, the game called Lykinia has very simple rules. You only have to place the cubes, discover the effects. So once you place the cube, whatever happens around it will kind of react to the cube. And that leads to a little bit more complex systemic behaviors. This is a little GIF. I really love GIFs of how the game works. It's free. You can try it out. So it allows you to kind of explore this topic in a very playful way and to see for yourself the consequences that are building up. So how to build gardens and reclaim the world in the Anthropocene. Right, so these are very different examples of games, but they all have something in common, and that's the systems thinking. So how parts interrelate with one another. So you do not only think about objects, you think how one thing leads to another. how the system changes and how the system works over time, how the system works within the context of larger systems, right? And that's why I said systems thinking today in today's world is actually usually by designers presented as the so-called design thinking. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. 2013, there was a Ludic Century Manifesto written by a game designer, Eric Zimmerman. And in that Ludic Manifesto, many points that he's making 60 years later are alluding exactly to that. So games are increasingly systemic, especially computer games, digital games. They're modular, they're customizable, they're participatory. Games are intertwined in complex systems. Games are representing, in very many ways, the so-called systemic society. That's what at least we have become, especially with the big data acquisition from everything. And games, above all, are dynamic systems. There's another very helpful concept to help you understand how it happens on the game level. It's called procedural rhetorics. Games can persuade. Game systems have a persuasive power. And it's no longer about the visuals. This is what you might see on the surface of a game. It's about how the game operates, how the game works, how the rules are intertwined with one another. So how do you learn through systems and processes is the question here. How to use processes persuasively, and how to make sense of the world through procedurality. And procedurality understood as an ability to execute a series of rules. So as you see, all those concepts are very scientific, in fact, but they all belong to the realm of games in many ways. So if we take all of them together and all of the examples, we might think that games are systemic and modular. Games are dynamic systems. Games are emergent above all, the very complex strategic games. So they begin in a very simple way, but they lead to complexities like this, right? So think about chess. We all know the rules of chess, but the possibilities are, well, almost endless. They're not endless, but there are very many. So they emerge from the very simple rules at the beginning. The same with the alphabet. The first thing you learn as a linguist is how the simple rules of the alphabet and the very confined number of signs lead to potentially endless combinations. And that's what we do with language. That's, again, exactly the same principle going back to Laikinia, to the game that you just saw. Right. So bringing it all together, on the one hand, the playfulness or the playful aspect of collaboration and competition at the same time, and building community, which is extremely important. Without community, without building, and in your case, you all belong into slightly different communities, but without being able to get together, you cannot really solve the big issues. But the problem is the big issues of today, not that it was different in the 1960s or ever, but the big issues are actually too complex. We do not know where to begin, neither in sciences nor in humanities. I guess in sciences, maybe the story is a little bit simpler because as a scientist and as a science scientist, you tend to think in a problem and solution kind of way. As a humanities scholar, and we represent humanities, what you learn is to question things from the very start. So it's very hard to come up with solutions because you would question all of them, and you would question even the way of finding the solution, right? So the stuff that you're working on, okay, so that's bringing all those three together, are utterly complex. Together, even more so. And this is where the play as method comes in the hope, maybe, that by thinking in a game, in a systemic, in a design thinking way, we can step by step try to build bridges between those different disciplines and between those different questions, and try to find out if we can simulate at least some answers.
And tearing down the walls between the disciplines, especially between the big rift between science and humanities, because we really need to work together in order to solve the problems we have in front of us.
That's why we're so thankful for the invitation to the Keynote because we know that the previous keynote was also representing a very different discipline, and we are representing humanities, interdisciplinary humanities. He was representing interdisciplinary sciences, so it all kind of plays well together.
It's not two ideologies, actually. We have to find a new ideology together.
Right. And the very last thing, so we have a little proposal. You don't have to do it. We know that you have probably your workshops, your day planned out. But try to think if you can work together, if you can work between the different groups that you were assigned to, if you could maybe even design a game that would try to, at least on paper, offer some kind of a solution, or a game for outreach, and this is what CERN is really good at. A game for outreach, with that I mean, how do you present the complexity of a problem to the outside world, to the politicians even, to understand the consequences, right? It can be a board game, it can be a digital game. But once you simulate something, once you boil the complex scientific questions into a set of rules and a behavioral system, which a game is, maybe the person who actually gets to play that game sees the consequences of certain types of actions, or that is at least a hope. So the question that we thought might bring all of those together from a user perspective is how to use the technology. We all live in the digital world, and the digitality is combining all those. How to use it in a green way. Is it even possible? And we're not talking about, you know, building renewable energy data centers, because that's not on the user's part. What can we do? So when we start small, what can we do as users to have a better life? Healthier, more environmentally friendly, and alluding to all those different, very complex issues. But how do we still communicate? The technology we have will not cease to exist, right? So that's the kind of question we leave you with. And thanks for your attention. We're very much looking forward to getting to know you, your projects, problems, and spend some time with you, hopefully. And yeah, thanks a lot. A little thing, I actually came back to Germany before the Brexit happened, so I no longer represent Alberta University in Scotland. I am now in Stuttgart at the Media Academy, but I still keep doing what I'm doing. So, thank you.
So then, does this work at all? I mean, probably you just spoke out very loudly all the time, because I think it's not working at all. A little bit. A little bit, okay. Thank you so much, and then Sonia, welcome to Germany, even though it's not a very fortunate reason that you mentioned the Brexit, that you came just before the Brexit, but we're happy to have you here. So, all right. We're a little late, a little running behind the schedule, but I would still like to take in a few questions, if you have any questions. Yes?
Should I introduce myself? Okay, cool. Hi, Julia, America. I had a question just with talking about Latenia. I wanted to know what your opinion was about Minecraft and what you, I guess you take from that, because it seems like they have very similar kind of like build style. So what's your opinion on that? Thank you.
Thanks.
And this was great, by the way.
Well, that's a big question, though. Well, Minecraft, you all know Minecraft, right? Minecraft is a kind of a game that works like Lego, but in a digital world. But Minecraft was designed with a very different purpose. It's a game when you have a lot of freedom, so you can build things out of the blocks yourself. But I guess with the rules, the question is, do the rules or the free rules in Minecraft allow you to build levels as a player, or that would in one way or another be critical towards the climate change, right? Or is it just a game where you put there are many modes, there are competitive modes in Minecraft where you have to, or you can just freely play, dig a hole for as long as you can to get to the core of the earth. The big difference is although it looks similar, they're both kind of aesthetically, at least, the Lycinia looks like a pixelated game. What La Mole Industria is doing is every game they design is a game on the systemic level, so with the procedures and with the rules. The game makes some kind of or opens up a possibility for a commentary on a certain topic. Which means when you play Lycinia, a game for the Anthropocene, And when you see the relationships, you have to discover for yourself. They don't give you much. But when you see how the world changes, how you kind of replant and garden, and maybe some spheres are not possible to turn into green spheres anymore, maybe the world is doomed and you cannot turn it into this green garden. But the procedure of Kenya is supposed to make a comment on that. And Minecraft is a commercial game which you can kind of freely play. It has a similar aesthetic, but I think it doesn't make a point on climate change as such, right? Mm-hmm. It could, but only on the aesthetic level. Its procedure is made for something else. It's an open, it's a Lego game kind of sorts.
Now you're on your own, but
I can take anthropology questions.
I guess I'm sure that there are more questions. We have time for one or two more questions. Yes.
There's a third person coming on stage. No, he doesn't want to take questions.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I am also a sociology major, so I was really excited to see that there were people speaking from the humanities and social science perspective. I really enjoyed when you both spoke about gaming as a way to help people's mindset or them to understand certain things in society. And I was thinking in terms of how people learn different video games without really knowing the rules, but they're just equipped to know how to play those games, such as Minecraft and those kinds of things. Do you think that we're, as humans, inclined to use gaming as our way to understand society, or were we taught that?
Okay, so I would have to flip the question a little bit. I think if you think about play and playfulness, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Is it taught or is it acquired? I think it's a question that is almost an impossibility to answer. I mean, we are, or Anna is watching that little being. He's 4 months old now, and he's very playful. But the question that we also had was, is he playful because he's primed to learn through play? Or is playfulness and this kind of mode something that we're born with? Games is another thing. Games is definitely something that you learn. Games are confined by rules. Games are not the same as free play. So I would probably tend, although I'm not a cognitive scientist, but I would probably tend towards understanding play as something, as a mode of experience in life that we're probably born with or that we have pretty much early on. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that is contra, that is versus work. Sometimes it's used like that, play versus work. It's not like that. I mean, they're both modes of experiences. So play is something that you can probably, it's a much more of a constant thing. And games are definitely something that you have to learn. You have to learn how to play by the rules, and you have to learn how to interpret the world in a confined way. So, yeah.
Let me maybe ask you a follow-up question. If you use games and playing as a teaching method, how do students react? Because they're more used to the left side of the picture we saw earlier, especially also in the context of universities. And then you come there and you say, okay, let's play a game. What are the initial reactions? I'm guessing that some people are not really used to that from this kind of environment.
I'm the wrong person to ask because for the past few years I've been working with students that are either game designers or that are already kind of prepared for that kind of experience. But Anna will try to do it. She's teaching anthropology students, which are not used to it at all.
They love it. The students love it. Some of them wander off to game industry actually and say finally they found out what they actually wanted to do. They ended up in anthropology because they didn't know what they want to do, and then they go to games. But they really love it because, no, my initial point was, and it's still valid, is I have students who do not know how to really read for a long time. They're digital students, and how do you make them having fun? And they have fun when they play, and so they start playfully dealing with complex things, and that's how it works, like little children. Like I learned reading and writing and doing mathematics as a child, and I didn't like to sit down all the time. That's how they do it, actually. And so they really started to read. They did role-play games, and they read 2,000 pages of complex stuff to build it in to have a fieldwork designed, and it really works. It's amazing.
I have another
think it works for all
example,
disciplines.
which may be good for that question as well. I am currently working on a project, on an interdisciplinary project with students of, game design, these are the playful ones, but also industrial design, which normally has nothing to do with play and games, and animation. And those students we are cooperating with the German Council for Sustainable Architecture. And the funny thing is that the architects, the sustainable architects, turned to us and said, we actually need to learn or we need to teach about sustainability when we talk to manufacturers, when we talk to investors and many other stakeholders. We need to do it in another way, because when we come to them with a 300-page document on sustainability with 20 different categories and variables, nobody wants to read it, nobody understands. Or when we talk at them for 60 minutes, they don't understand the relationships. It's very hard to see what sustainable architecture with very complex rules of what it means is leading to. Mm-hmm. So that council was actually asking us to design games that would interpret this specific problem in a playful way and simulate it, basically. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And the industrial designers were not very happy at the beginning, but they're learning.
Thank you very much, Sonia Fizek and Anja Dippel.
Thank you. Our pleasure.